Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Joseph Malone and I am a second year graduate student studying history with a focus and emphasis on Nazi Germany, the Holocaust, and more broadly, Jewish history. Today, I am going to be providing an overview of what is to come on this YouTube channel, as I'm beginning to shift the use of the channel as a resource channel that teachers are able to use, professors, students, and obviously for myself as I begin to move into teaching beyond my graduate program. And so this channel, this website that goes along with this channel is going to be a channel centered around modern European history. So we're going to be getting into topics like the Holocaust. We're going to be getting into topics such as the rise of Nazism and Nazi Germany more broadly. We're going to talk about World War II and the significance of that, and just more broadly, modern European history. To understand when we think about European history, not to look at it so much as some have classified it as Western civilization, but to look at the broad social, cultural, intellectual history that has moved from Europe, all parts of Europe, up until today. So within that, I'm beginning this channel focusing on the Holocaust. That is where my research is mostly pointed at in my graduate program, and so my level of knowledge is most concentrated in that area. And so I begin to imagine, if I was to teach a course on the Holocaust, what approach would I take? And so a lot of thought went into this, and I discovered that there's 5 very important points, and I'm going to discuss those points a bit before we get into the first video where I talk about the ancient roots of anti-Semitism. So if you're going to study Holocaust history and you really want to understand in a broad sense, well, what did that mean for the world, for Jews, for Germany? If you want to understand, even out of that context, looking at certain themes such as genocide and asking the question, how does, because it's true, if we look at the Holocaust, Jews had lived among Germans for centuries. How does your neighbor, your German neighbor, turn on you and begin to commit mass genocide on the level and proportions that we saw in the Holocaust? To understand those various different aspects of history, which are very much relevant today, we're looking at modern events going on in Israel and Palestine. We're looking at things that are going on in Russia and Ukraine. And as it seems, if it's my view, my professional view, the world has not learned its lesson. And it's an adage in history in that history just simply repeats itself. We keep making the same mistakes because we haven't learned where we come from. So it's very important for me as a graduate student studying history, as a historian of modern European history, as a historian who studies the Holocaust, who studies Nazi Germany, it's very important that I be a participant and pull and teach the significance of this event so that future generations don't go through the same thing that we saw in the Holocaust, where we saw 6 million Jews die, murdered. If you take the broader event, World War II, millions of soldiers dead. And you have to really ask the question, for what? Sure, the Allies won, but when you have the level of casualties that you had in World War II, and if you want to go beyond that, World War I, you really have to beg the question, who won? Sure, you won the war in the sense that you won and you're able to dictate the terms of a new world order, but did you really win? So, for my students, how I'm approaching teaching Holocaust history, I have 5 components of it that I think are very important, and I'm going to go over those 5 components and discuss each component a bit and connect it to the bigger picture of understanding the significance of Holocaust history, genocide, what it meant for the Jews, what it meant for Germany. The first thing I want my students to understand, and this is what we're going to talk about in the next video, is to understand the Holocaust, you need to have a depth of understanding of the roots of anti-Semitism in Europe. Anti-Semitism did not just frolic out of the air in the 20th century. Anti-Semitism in Europe has very deep roots, going back 2,000 years to the ancient civilizations of the Roman Empire. In this empire, we saw 2 very important things happen. The emergence of Christianity, 3 things rather. The emergence of Christianity, the denial of Jesus Christ as the Messiah by the Jews, and third, the crucifixion of Jesus, which at the time was alleged that the Jews were the causes, the perpetrators of Jesus's crucifixion, of Christ's crucifixion, or the Messiah's, the Christianity's Messiah's crucifixion. Now, I want to preface what I just said by also providing the context for you to understand the roots of anti-Semitism is very important, but it doesn't explain the entire picture. What I want to do with the reason why you want to understand the roots of anti-Semitism in Europe is you want to be able to imagine a world where there are biases and prejudices towards a particular population, particularly in this case, the Jews. We don't want to have this idea in our head of like anti-Semitism just all of a sudden rising in the 20th century. No, there's long roots of that. So it's important to understand that it doesn't tell you the entire picture of what happened in the Holocaust, but it's very significant in understanding the Holocaust. Now, if you stay with me for my next 4 points, you'll understand why I just said what I said. The second thing that I want my students to understand when we're studying the Holocaust is Nazi ideology and its connection to the Holocaust. There are various, because Jewishness does not represent only a religion. To be Jewish is racial, but it's also spiritual. It's also religious. So there's components of anti-Semitism. There's an economic component. There's a racial component. There's a religious component. When you talk about the connection between Nazi ideology and the Holocaust, paying attention to the economic component, paying attention to the racial component, more importantly, is really important for understanding the events that came, the orders that were sent down to battalion chiefs, policemen, and soldiers to murder millions of Jews. It doesn't explain why the policemen, the soldiers did what they did, but it does explain why they received those orders in the first place. So we have to understand within this realm that a component of Nazi ideology was the idea of subhumans versus humans, humans versus subhumans. There was a hierarchy of racial benevolence, right? In other words, the Aryan race, the race that was believed to be blonde-haired, blue-eyed, consisting of the German population, the Aryan race was placed at the top of this racial hierarchy. And every other race was believed, and this is including other European nationalities, the Slavs in the East, they were placed below the Aryan race. Jews obviously being placed even further below. So there's this connection between Aryans are human and everything else, every other race below, including my race, African American or Black American, we were seen as subhumans in the eyes of the Nazi ideology. And so it's very important to understand that connection between Nazi ideology and the Holocaust, because then you can understand the next part that we're going to get into as to why police battalions, soldiers, policemen received the orders that they did to murder hundreds, thousands, millions of Jews. So the third component that's very important to understanding the Holocaust is the removal of Jews from German society or from societies where Nazi influence was prevalent. You look at Romania, Poland. It's very important to look at that, understand the removal of the Jews, understand the conditions that it was like to live in the ghettos, understand what it was like once they started moving from the ghettos into concentration camps, what those conditions were like, and also being able to make the connection between, on both sides, we have the survivor testimonies, written recordings from people who survived the Auschwitz camp, for example, or the Treblinka camp, or the people who survived living in the Warsaw ghettos, for instance, in Poland. It's very important to look at that, but also very important on the other side to see what it was like for the Nazis, what it was like for a Nazi soldier, what it was like for a Nazi policeman, what it was like for a Nazi to oversee or to be in charge of these camps. And we can see that through recordings of memoirs from Nazi soldiers and policemen. And so then you really get to see both sides of what is going on. Very important aspect of history is being able to not just tell one side. I'm very big on telling both sides of the story. And so then you can go in and you're not biased. I'm not trying to indoctrinate my students into thinking a particular thing about the Holocaust. I want to provide you the information and you make of that what you make of it. And I think that that's the hallmark of a really great teacher. So fourth, connecting this thing that we just talked about from the bottom up to the top down approach of history, Fourth, it's very important to understand the autonomy of Nazi killing agents. The research that has been done recently on the Holocaust has revealed that Nazi killing agents, and when I say Nazi killing agents, I'm talking about policemen, I'm talking about police chiefs, I'm talking about Nazi soldiers. Recent research has revealed that there was no significant consequence for refusing to kill Jews. And so this begs the question, if that is true, if that is the case, we have to go deeper. Why were so many Jews murdered at the hands of Nazi killing agents if there was no significant punishment, if a soldier, a policeman, decided that they couldn't, their will could not stomach doing this? And this is very important when you look at developments in the Holocaust, from the shooting, the point blank shooting of Jews, to the transition into gas chambers, into carbon monoxide murders and so forth. That connection is very important as well. So it's important to look at the fact that these agents of the Nazis had agency. And that is important because you can't, that what that means is that you can't simply look at ideology. You can't say that these people killed Jews because they were indoctrinated by Nazism. It's evident that many of them weren't. And in fact, many of them created their own justification as to why they were doing what they were doing. But it wasn't just because they were influenced with Nazism. They were devout believers of their Führer, Adolf Hitler, and that they worshipped him at his feet. That may have been true for some, no doubt. Do not want to take that away from those who were in that side of history, which is true. But it's also very true that many weren't indoctrinated, and many found a meaning of their own in the killing of Jews and their own sorts of justification for doing it. So it's very important, fourth, to look at the autonomy of Nazi killing agents. Fifth, and the last thing that I believe is the most important, when you bring genocide and the Holocaust full circle, and we want, and if we get into a comparative narrative with the Armenian genocide, the Bosnian genocide, the Rwandan genocide, what's really important about analyzing the Holocaust is looking at post-Holocaust. What did the Holocaust mean for the world? What did it mean for Germany? And most importantly, what did it mean for the Jews? When you look at post-war action, the war crime tribunals, when we look at the League of Nations deciding to create a multi-state in the state of Palestine, you know, having basically essentially a half Palestinian state, a half Muslim state, and a half Jewish state. These things, these developments are very important. The rise of Zionism, they're very important for understanding where we're at today when we look at events that are taking place right now in 2024 in Israel, when we look at events that are taking place right now in Russia and Ukraine. So I find looking at the post-war significance, the post-Holocaust significance, looking at reparations, what ways that Germany tried to make amends, ways that countries who were involved in the Holocaust tried to make amends for what they did. It's very important, especially when you go with a comparative narrative, when we look at the Holocaust and the post-Holocaust reparations that Germans did, I mean, that Jews did receive, it really shines a light, in my estimation, on we can't make, the Germans can't make right. They could never make right what took place. The forced labor camps, the concentration camps, the mass murder, the complete persecution, humiliation. You can never, I don't think there's any there's no legislation, there's no amount of words that can produce enough sorrow that can genuinely make it right. But what I look at as a historian is I look at the effort. And what I say to that is, when we make a connection, the effort to at least try to make things right. Come on, man, you're messing up my video. The effort to at least try to make things right. When we look at it in a broader context, in Germany, you cannot mention, there are no statues of Hitler. Nazism, the word Nazi triggers German people. If you just say Hitler, if you just say Nazi, I mean, it's almost like saying the N-word in the United States. That's the level of magnitude and how seriously, in a post-Holocaust, post-World War II world, Germans take making amends to the wrongs of the generation before them. But what's really important, and what I want my United States students to understand, is to look at the development and the changes and the amends that have been made on the German front, and make a comparison with the United States and the type of amendments that have been made, and the type of reparational developments that have happened in the United States. In the United States, there are still monuments of Confederate soldiers who we know were fighting for slavery. They were fighting to maintain the status quo, to maintain their way of life. And so I think it's very important for a student of the United States, if you're gonna study Holocaust history, it's very important that you understand post-Holocaust reparations, the rise of Zionism, and these various different developments, and compare them to the United States and the kinds of progress that we've made. Again, I want to reiterate as I close out, there is no statue in Germany of Hitler. There is no statue in Germany of Joseph Goebbels. Joseph Goebbels was the minister of propaganda. There's no statue in Germany of Heinrich Himmler. Heinrich Himmler was the mentor of Hitler. He basically helped Hitler become who he was behind the scenes. Hitler was a very rough, rugged, ragged individual in the 1920s. Himmler kind of reeled him in and helped him look a bit cleaner, combed his hair back, and really refined his orator skills. So I'm not telling you guys what to think, but I do want you guys to think about those connections. And to think about, well, what does that mean for our country? What does that mean for the world? Because that's my goal, that's my aim as a teacher. So in the first video, we're going to be discussing the ancient roots of anti-Semitism. And basically, when I talk about ancient civilizations, I'm talking about up until about the period of about 400 AD. So what we see in the Roman Empire is two things, three things actually. And I'm going to bring it full circle because I talked about this earlier. We see the rise of Christianity, the birth of Jesus, the denial by the Jews of Jesus as the Messiah, and the crucifixion of Jesus that is alleged to be perpetrated and orchestrated by the Jewish people. And so these developments in ancient Rome really set the foundation for anti-Semitism that would grow later in the Middle Ages. Later on, we begin to see alleges of ritual murders that Jews were committing. We began to see Jews were blamed for the Black Plague in medieval Europe. It's a lot of developments that we see, anti-Semitic developments that we see come out of just these four components of ancient Roman anti-Semitism, ancient European anti-Semitism. So I'm going to be discussing that. I'm going to be unpacking the development of the story. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this video where I kind of laid the foundation of where I'm going to go for the next few videos. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you. Bye.